Here we go. Here's chapter 9 of Little House on the Prairie. A fire on the hearth. Now the hearth is a place where the fireplace is. Okay. Outside the house, close to the log wall opposite the door, Pa cut away the grass and scraped the ground smooth. He was getting ready to build the fireplace. Then he and Ma put the wagon box on the wheels again, and Pa hitched up Pet and Patty. The rising sun was shortening all the shadows. Hundreds of meadowlarks were rising from the prairie, singing higher and higher in the air. Their songs came down from the great clear sky like a rain of music, and all over the land where the grasses waved and murmured under the wind, thousands of little dicky birds clung with their tiny claws to the blossoming weeds and sang their thousands of little songs. Pet and Patty sniffed the wind and whinnied with joy. They arched their necks and pawed at the ground because they were eager to go. Pa was whistling while he climbed to the wagon seat and took up the reins. Then he looked down at Laura, who was looking up at him, and said, he stopped whistling and said, "Want to go along, Laura? You and Mary?" Ma said they could. They climbed up the wheels, clinging to the spokes with their bare toes, and they sat on the high wagon seat beside Pa. Pet and Patty started with a little jump, and the wagon went jolting down the road that Pa's wagon wheels had made. They went down between the bare reddish-yellow walls of earth, all ridged and wrinkled by forgotten rains. Then they went on, across the rolling land and the creek bottoms. Masses of trees covered some of the low, rounded hills, and some of them were grassy, open spaces. Deer were lying on the shadows of the trees, and deer were grazing in the sunshine on the green grass. They lifted their heads and pricked their ears and stood chewing and watching the wagon with their soft, large eyes. All along the road, the wild lark spur was blossoming pink and blue and white. Birds balanced on yellow plumes of goldenrod, and butterflies were fluttering. Starry daisies lighted the shadows under the trees. Squirrels chattered on branches overhead. White-tailed rabbits hopped along the road, and snakes wriggled quickly across it when they heard the wagon coming. Deep in the lowest valley, the creek was running in the shadow of dirt bluffs. When Laura looked up those bluffs, she couldn't see the prairie grass at all. Trees grew up the bluffs where the earth had crumbled, and where the bare dirt was so steep that the trees couldn't grow on it. Bushes held on desperately with their roots. Half-naked roots were high above Laura's head. "Where are the Indian camps?" Laura asked Pa. He had seen the Indians' deserted camps here among the bluffs, but he was too busy to show them to her now. He must get the rocks to build the fireplace. "You girls can play," he said, "but don't go out of my sight and don't go into the water. And don't play with snakes. Some of the snakes down here are poison." So Laura and Mary played by the creek while Pa dug the rocks he wanted and loaded them into the wagon. They watched the long-legged water bugs skate over the glassy, still pools. They ran along the bank to scare the frogs and laughed when the green-coated frogs with their white vests plopped into the water. They listened to wood pigeons call among the trees and the brown thrush singing. The thrush is a bird. They saw the little minnows swimming all together in the shallow places where the creek ran sparkling. The minnows were thin gray shadows in the rippling water. Only now and again, one minnow flashed the sunshine from its silvery belly. The minnow is a little tiny fish. There was no wind along the creek. The air was still and drowsy warm. It smelled of damp roots and mud, and it was full of the sound of rustling leaves and of the water running. Okay, pausing there for part 2.